records on that, the state water resources. Anyway, our well was contaminated with MPPE, which is interesting.
It is.
So,
Where
yeah.
did that come from?
We don't know.
Well, it's gasoline and.
Yeah, it's an additive, but
It's slippery, it's the,
So it just gets out there.
yeah, it'll go in front of the gasoline pump.
Yeah.
But yeah, see, we have no gasoline pump near us,
Yeah.
so it's very easy to contaminate wells in our area. Like
Yeah.
he was saying, you hit one of those cracks and everything just is right
Yeah.
into it. You know?
Well, that's something we will make note of, and again, it could be in the, you know, residential design standards for this property that becomes a more stringent requirement, you know, based on the groundwater and the well conditions.
The regulatory regimes through the Regional Water Quality Control Board and a wastewater discharge permit,
Right.
rather than at the county level.
Yeah, so the Regional Water Quality Control Board.
Yeah, but I represented them for years, and they don't get down into minutia. That's the problem. If you've got inappropriate pesticide application, they're not gonna ever see it. Even if someone complained, it's not something you see. So unless you incorporate design in the beginning to keep that runoff for any of the creeks, the Regional Water Quality Control Board and all of those requirements are inapplicable. Or even if they're applicable, they don't work.
Yeah, I work with the board and I do it, and they're busy.
Yeah. Well, anyhow, we can, that can be a requirement of,
Yeah, I think they're.
and it also is affected by landscape, you know, elements and whatever is
Yeah,
chosen.
I mean, I guess the two things, there's the physical thing of how you do the drainage and the engineering of it, and then the second part is if you don't motivate people to use pesticides because you restrict what they can put their front yard in as, or you sort of do it through guidelines of what you're looking at on site,
Right.
you minimize the chance that it'll happen. And I think that's certainly, when we get to the landscape part, that's another way to
Definitely.
approach it.
Susan, you have a comment
Yeah,
about?
you had mentioned that we could take this with us.
Yes.
Are we gonna get soft copies of this as well?
Which kind?
Soft, or
Electronic.
Oh, electronic? Oh,
Yes.
yeah, you call it soft copy? Okay. Sure, yeah, we can give you that, sure, no problem, yeah. It's a PDF, we have it in, it's, because these files integrate, you know, JPEGs and
Great.
various files, map files, and it's easily viewed on the computer. You can enlarge it at high, you know, resolution.
Great.
Comes out well, yeah.
To answer your question, I have a comment there.
Frank, yeah.
So right now, the water percolates back to the ground, goes into people's wells and people use that water.
Right now, yeah.
Right now. So with the paving of asphalt, housing pads, there's this areas for water to go down these certain cracks. So potentially, the wells that surround the residents might be affected by just a development. That's one of the things that needs to be considered.
Definitely.
How you take care of that, I have no idea, but certainly.
Yeah,
would have an
it's an
impact.
impact that needs to be addressed, yeah, I agree. Okay, so just going on to the next thing here, you saw this, a version of this before in our slideshow, but it went by very fast, and Nancy, I'd like you to maybe explain this.
Well, you got a copy here.
And everyone does have a copy. There's exhibit number 3 in your package. So just, and again, this is putting a number of different factors together. There's a lot of information on this one exhibit, but it's helpful to understand the site. Again, we don't expect to make everyone into a site planner, but this is like site planning studio. This is what we studied this in school, and Brian, this is what you learn how to put all of these different pieces of data together to come up with a layout of anything, any kind of site planning, whether it's office, commercial, residential. These are the kind of things, the steps we go through.
Exactly. This is a very fun process. I love diagramming and showing information and kind of distilling it down into its essential components. Where we started looking at this was we kind of stepped back a bit and we looked at the local freeways and the interchanges, and also just where Shingle Springs is and how Shingle Springs identifies itself within the county. And we found this particularly interesting. This is from the planning documents, And this basically is a Shingle Springs area district that's identified by the county. And then your site sits pretty much in the heart of that area. Placerville, Cameron Park, down that way. The next thing, moving in a bit more, we started looking at some of the historic planning documents and what's been identified as your Old Town District, right out here, just off of French Creek Road, along Mother Road. And what we found interesting about this was the adjacency of all these residential areas and the site to that particular district. And it's actually pretty close. It is, if the amenities were there and the infrastructure, you could actually walk there or bike there, and you are close into town. Next thing we looked at, railroad alignment along here, and I understand that there's talk about maybe turning that into an amenity too. But it's part of the historic character of the community and something we thought important to look at and to recognize. Moving back down into the site, along the edge here you can see basically the boundaries of the site. And then what we did was, next thing with Brian's assistance, we took a really close look at all the existing slopes and then the tree canopy. And the tree canopy is shown, and this is generated from a computer, and the computers get to be a little abstract. But the green generally represents the significant areas of oak woodlands, and this is a unique landscape too. You're in a transitional area from going from the valley oaks up into the pine woodlands, and it's a very, as a child I spent a lot of time up in this area, and I gained a great appreciation for this landscape, for the plant materials, and how all the plants have adapted themselves to this unique microclimate and the soils and everything. So you have, the whole area has some wonderful resources. So slopes right here, and then what we identified was kind of the high points along there, just generally how they flow. And what this starts to do too is kind of inform you about how the site is shaped, where things might be located if you were to put things onto here. The next thing we looked at was water resources. Obviously, the big pond up here, then the water continues to flow down through there. We have a big water resource along Sawmill Creek. That's got a lot of opportunities. It's a wonderful resource, definitely something we want to acknowledge. The other thing we looked at too was just access points, and where we understood that it would be easy to get where you could access the site, and then where there's been an expressed interest for us not to access the point. So you see these red dots along the edges where we know that we cannot bring through a connection in the future.
Yeah.
I want to talk, the next one, I apologize that make you all, I can do is pick this up. The next step in our typical planning process is taking a look at the views. And this is where Google Earth is an amazing resource. But you can actually drive around the site, and what we did is I identified all the key views, or what we felt were key views, and looking into the site, and what your visual impression is as you drive along the roads, and also from some of the adjacent residences. Obviously, a lot of beautiful, attractive views onto the site. What I also found interesting is that many of these views, you actually can't even see into the site. The site is obscured right now by existing woodlands and by topography, and that's something we look at very closely, and in terms of site planning, it's always a very good strategy to acknowledge. Where if you do start to locate things, you study these views, and then you look at where you can locate them so you minimize the visual impact of what's going on in other areas of the site.
So before you take this away, I wanted to ask, because I know Joel, I'd like to hear maybe some more discussion from you all about the Old Town planning and what you're thinking of from a community planning standpoint there as to what the future might be for that district. We may not have all the views identified that are of importance to you. I'd like to make sure we cover that, and also with this previous diagram. So maybe we can just see if there's any questions or comments or additional points. But I don't know if there's anyone working on the Old Town or the Shingle Springs Community Plan, and Joel, you had said that was an active item, and so I wanted to make sure we understood where your thinking was on that topic.
Billboards and ugly businesses, all I can say.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, in terms of, there is very little kind of traditional retail
Yeah.
town type development in that area. I mean, it's a mix of garages and.
It's eclectic to say the least.
The old railroad.
Well, there's the old,
The train station.
the depot
restaurant,
is pretty nice.
And the feed store.
Least be the coffee shop.
There's a framework
How did it
there.
used to look nice till they painted it blue?
You know, it's sort of a shame, I just want to, Marlon Guinea or Ginny? How do you pronounce it?
Guinea.
Guinea. He was gonna be here today, and, because we wanted to at least hear what he had to say, but his son's getting married or something, and he called at the last minute, said he didn't realize that
That
there
the
was a
son was
conflict,
getting
and someone else, limited without looking at it on his calendar, whatever, but so he couldn't make it, but that would have been nice, and it's too bad that he couldn't, because I know he's got ideas and has tried to develop down the property he controls down there, for a long time.
Yeah.
Well, the county used to have
Yeah,
Shingle Springs
pardon?
several times. They forced when the country store, which was a focal point of the community, really, I mean, you sit on their porch and meet everybody. When it burned down, they wouldn't let them rebuild on the site because they had to have enough setback and so many parking places, which is
Right.
impossible.
Yeah.
The old
So
stone
then that-
building fell
Then
down.
that automatically changes the whole character. because
Yeah,
They
and then
didn't
they-
have, they were parking buggies and horses, not cars.
Then they started booting anything they didn't want Placerville down to Shingle, all the car dealerships and the big sign and the, it's, Shingle Springs has been an orphan and laughing stock for a lot of years until they wanted something from us.
Yeah.
And that.
Well, that's why I'm trying to-
historical, isn't it?
We weren't able to save the old mill after the burn down.
Yeah.
They tore that down. We had people that came in while they were there. The gentleman that owned the old Big Oak, and they built a restaurant bar in there that stayed with the train theme. It's beautiful.
It's beautiful, yeah.
Beautiful. Everything was well, and then they did everything in behind it, and it was, they've made a mess of the whole town. But the idea, and I was around at the time, and I know you were, the idea, really, the ideas that are involved, that are encompassed
Right,
in the 1977 Shingle Springs plan
right.
are pretty good even today if you could recover it. The recovery part is
Yeah, we have it. We've
yeah,
been
yeah, I
looking
know
at
it.
Yeah.
You know, it's available.
Yeah.
And that's the basis that those that are working on the plan now are using that as a base. And there's not a lot of modifications other than updating to that plan.
Okay,
Yeah.
so this is still a pretty good representation of the
Yeah,
vision?
and I think everybody that's been talked to, and of course,
Okay.
it would go back to the community
Right.
anyway, but
Right,
everybody is leaning toward keeping it as a railroad theme, because it was the railroad head.
right.
I mean, historically, you know, this is where the railroad ended.
Okay.
Here, Shingle Springs was.
Excellent, okay.
You know.
So trying to bring back some,
Yeah. Yeah.
some grouping of
And as
businesses.
Joyce said, you know, when they had the old store there and everything was there, you know, I guess you could say it was grandfathered in or whatever, but they couldn't rebuild it
Where
to the
was
same
that? I'm
standards.
so sorry, I don't really.
And the
It's-
post office
it's-
was there too.
Yeah,
wasn't it?
where the train station is now, the
Uh-huh.
restaurant, that was the post office.
Oh, because
Okay. And
Marlin's all.
then you've got the stucco building next to it. From there, all the way up was a wooden building.
Yeah.
And it housed,
Boardwalk.
with a boardwalk, yeah. And it housed everything from the country store, a butcher's shop, a bar, restaurant, you know. And it was really old.
Okay.
Well,
And then there was a little historic building right next to it, right where the gas station is, next to it. Well, although my grandparents owned that Frosty that was there, and that, you couldn't have an uglier building than the thing with those little circular tiles. But, you know, that historic building was right there that sort of gave it
Yeah.
character too.
And we had the other ones that burned down, you know, the old oak,
Big O.
It's a big
Big
old
O.
cafe.
Big O,
What's
but that
this?
was nothing but a
Sit
little
there.
old strip mall thing, and it, you know, it was as ugly as the things they got now, so.
So the park that's there on the south side of Mother Lode, was that always a
No,
park
no,
or
that's-
was it
no, no.
vacant?
That- that's
Used to be
very
part of that
recent.
ranch back there, that big,
Barnett.
Barnett Ranch.
But it's,
Yeah.
it seems
But see,
nice.
something
it's-
a lot of people don't know, you may not
It's
even
new.
know it, but right in behind the train station there is the old Shingle Springs Cemetery.
Yeah.
I
It's off the alley.
Uh-huh.
Right, it's
You
gonna
gotta go
take-
into the alley and then you can go up
Go up
into
the
the old
hill, the
cemetery.
scouts cleaned it up a few years
Yeah,
back.
they did.
So there's still-
Like some cabins or houses back behind that too? that-
There were a
that he
couple-
That Marlon Reed.
Oh, no, you're thinking the other side.
No, that's the other
Oh,
side.
okay.
Other side of the road.
If you're looking at those cabins behind you up the
Rose.
hill, then it's a
Oh, okay.
cemetery.
And people used to be able, they used to have hitching posts.
That was discussed within the group is, that French Creek is a very popular bicycle route.
And Old Frenchtown.
Yes, and Old Frenchtown Road. And the conflict between vehicles and bicycles is both a point of contention and a safety issue.
Totally.
And
It's hard, just for cars, it's not, it's dangerous.
Well, on Saturdays, you get like hundreds of bikers coming through that do that triangle. They do the Mother Lode, French Creek, and
They
Old
do this?
Frenchtown. Yeah.
You
can go up
It's
to
a
the
thing,
trail.
you do that circle.
South Shingle or Latrobe, you can do South Shingle, French Creek, and even if you wanted to go up to Latrobe, you can do it. That's why it's so
You
popular.
would probably know this as well, but I'm sure if you check the records of, there have been no auto bicycle accidents on those roads.
None.
There haven't been, surprising.
I do bike
Lot
it,
of-
it's
lot of road-
dangerous,
lot
but
of
you can hear the
vehicle.
cars coming and,
You
I
get-
mean, the traffic.
Yeah, they're in the spandex and they're
Yes,
geared
yeah,
up.
yes. So they,
Yeah.
But it would be nice
Yeah.
if the kids could ride
it
the
was
bikes.
still,
to
that would,
school.
that's a whole
Yeah.
different.
You wouldn't send those little kids out there.
No way, no way.
Way too risky.
I've had to work up to be able to ride that road.
Yeah.
It's a technical ride.
it's good exercise for your grip.
It's funny, since the no sense Stino signs have gone up and people that I know that know I'm doing this, this woman called me and said, Joel, I was just biking through Shingle Springs and she's doing one of those rides where it's to benefit, this was a cancer ride or
Cancer
whatever.
ride.
But she's barely, I mean, she was also telling me how often she fell during her bike ride. So she's like, not a real
No.
serious rider, and she was apparently riding through there, so that was a little scary to me, yeah.
Well, she was part of the game.
Yeah, which is like even
Right.
worse, right? I mean,
So when you're, like if you're trying to go somewhere on a Saturday morning and there's 200 of them ahead of you, it takes them long.
yeah,
Going up the hill,
that's-
especially.
if there's a slope, she's never gonna make it to the top of that slope. So she's walking a bike.
Yeah, but I think biking, walking, horses,
Because that makes me think that, well, we would be able to, there would be a thoroughfare all the way through connecting Frenchtown through the development for cars and bikes. On that display, you have little no through vehicular connections.
Right.
And you mentioned that, and those were agreed upon, that traffic can't go through there. Those wouldn't be access points. So the first question I had when you mentioned that was, by who, how do you agree? And then the other question was,
Okay.
that implies that all, like on the whole south area, we're like on French Creek, Old French Creek, that since where there aren't those symbols, that would be free entry, access, and to the development.
I think it's a discussion item, so I'd like to, I mean, if you think there are places where access should or should not be, then we should hear that.
At what point do those other,
These-
when was it discussed with whoever put those existing markers on there?
Okay, so let me ask Joel on that. I mean, so these, let's take them one at a time. So these two up here
Well,
on
I
the
think
north.
there are a couple of different approaches to this, and it's because one of the reasons that we thought this was such a ultimately a beneficial project, a sort of an opportunity to create a win-win situation overall, was because prior projects proposed out there didn't include all of the property. There were portions of the property. and they didn't have the ability to access directly to mother lode, for example, or to limit the impact directly on the neighborhood roads. And by assembling the three, the sense was we could focus the traffic internally and limit the connections. Now the problem that presents is you still need two connections to be safe from a fire and circulation.
You can't have just one way in.
And reasonable planning tells you shouldn't have like two at the top and none at the bottom because of the length of the project. Also, in discussions with the Department of Transportation, they expressed an interest in the idea of that connector through because of the safety concerns that we've just been talking about, that you could bring people up from the bottom through the project, and it would be a new road that was graded differently and had wider, shoulders and everything as compared with Old Frenchtown and French Creek, so it was considered a benefit. In discussing it more, obviously, there's a trade-off there, for sure, because you have concerns about the connections down there, just like other people had concerns about connections through their neighborhoods.
Except somebody talked to us and gave us an
Well,
opportunity.
I think but there are different qualities of the roads, and French Creek and Old Frenchtown are different than Ridge Road or Lost Creek Road. It's just that there's a different nature of that. Not to mention, one's at the bottom of the project and others are further up towards the top. But
Well, they're public roads versus private roads to begin with.
Yeah, but Bill, where are you suggesting you prefer?
Well, I'm not suggesting anything, I'm still trying to get some information
Okay.
from you guys, so, because I'm working up. So
Yeah.
where would your thorough connector be on this map?
Well, one place could be here, but it also could be here.
So using French Creek then?
Yes.
So all that traffic, all the bicycles, horses, and all the existing cars you're proposing would just use French Creek?
Not necessarily, because there could be an internal road and very limited access on French Creek. So you could be directing, by the way the roads are designed or aligned or configured, there would be an incentive for people, if they were living in here, again, regardless of how many, to have them come out this way and not use this, because you could make it more convenient to use an internal road that was constructed. That's a possibility.
I mean, I think in retrospect, it was perhaps naive to think the way we thought, which was that if you built the road the way we talked about, the way it's currently planned, the result would actually be less traffic up here and less traffic up here, because people would make that choice personally every time they got up here to say, well, this is going to be faster. Even if we come up here and have to go down Mother Lode, it's safer and ultimately maybe faster going French Creek. The impact on people here, we thought, would be a net positive, because it would be coming from down here. People from internally would also choose to go up. So while the access would be there, the traffic pattern would tend to go this way and not this way, or be down there. So that may not be, obviously, the concerns you're expressing indicate you don't feel that same way, and I understand that, but that was the thinking when we did it.
Right, it's up for discussion. I mean, if there's a better way to do it, and there's a way that works better from a community standpoint, that's what we wanted to bring out.
Or even if that point is necessary.
You mean any point here?
In the end, right,
Okay,
even if
James.
it's
Up at
necessary.
the northern half then, so I'm personally curious about this Via Lavenza extension. And is that still on the table? Is that still the plan, or are you planning on just dumping all that traffic right there on
You mean
Mother
to get
Lodes?
it from here
Yeah.
up to 50?
Yeah,
What's it called, the Via?
Via Lavenza extension, is that correct?
Yes.
Joel?
That was Dave Crisardo's, another Italian road name thinking, but the connection to Maggie Lane is what we're talking
Is
about,
that
right?
still on the
Well,
board?
it's not, I think for this discussion, we don't have anything on the board. And so
Okay.
if there must be a point at which that connection, which is,
So why isn't it open for discussion? And I think it's very valid for this exact workshop.
It is-
So to say that
it
it's
is up for
something that's
discussion.
off the
Joel, can I make a
board.
recommendation?
Yeah.
We're getting scattered here, and I think
Yeah.
these are exactly the type of
Yeah,
questions
this
you'll
is-
avoid if you go step by step through your list,
Well,
because
we-
we'll actually address them. Because if we start, just give me a second here, I understand what you're doing, but if we start bouncing around, we're never gonna get to anything coherent. We're gonna start, so,
Yeah, no, give me a little leeway here though, because to me, these are key issues, what Bill is raising and Jade, so, and we will get to that, but it works well with this diagram. Just wanted to get a sense of.
Nothing's off the table.
Nothing is off the table, everything's potentially on the table, so on that extension, you think that's a good idea or a bad idea? Because I've heard both considerations.
Bad idea.
It's a bad idea.
Yeah, I mean, there's immense grading that they're gonna have to do to even connect into Buckeye.
Okay.
A lot of grading.
And it may not be necessary if this is less
Correct.
intensity, there's fewer cars, then you may not need it. So that would be good, Tim.
And my big concern is the Buckeye School. It's the
Impact on
traffic.
Buckeye School.
And Montessori, there's 2 schools there.
And Montessori.
Okay,
So
so,
it's a safety issue and just quality of life issue for the kids and the parents.
right.
And there's already a huge traffic jam there in the morning
Yeah,
drive.
right.
Okay.
It's off at Buckeye
Good.
Montessori.
If we don't need it and people don't want it, then why do it? So that, take that off, and maybe everyone
You could
has
ask the same question on a much broader scale. If people don't want it, why are you gonna?
Well, now,
I mean,
now
we're
you
gonna
asked,
answer that as a talking
your
point.
first question is, that, well, first of all, there is existing entitlement, even if nobody proposed more than what is allowed in zoning, so you can still build something. But you asked, these, I think, were specific requests of these homeowner associations
So
to not
another
connect.
question.
That's why that's there. We,
Okay.
you want to argue against that, that's fine. You
I'm
can
not
say-
arguing,
Yeah.
I'm just curious, well, what other agreements did you make with them besides that we're not privy to? I mean, it's a point of concern, obviously.
Understood. As far as I understand, and I'm not the person who negotiated anything, that was the main point there, to not make those connections.
Because of Brand Pierce.
Right, so,
Well, what else are they getting?
Joy?
To me, it would make more sense to have a few more little outlets than to do one big main thoroughfare, because we don't want that kind of
Everything
traffic
coming out
and
in one
speed
place.
and everything else.
You'd
So why
rather
can't
have
you
it-
even connect some of those red circles? I mean, that looks like that would make sense, because that's more of the area where we would like
Yeah.
to see the development go,
Where?
rather than, here, let me show you.
There are those ways up the top.
Yeah, those ways up at the top are seem to be your natural ways in and out.
These are the areas that I think that we kind of want to preserve this open space. It would make more sense to put, you know,
Can you
the
back up
more,
just a sec, so I can just make sure?
Yeah, go ahead.
more housing in these areas, and if you had more outlets to get out, then you're dispersing the traffic rather than just putting the.
Diffusing
We
it.
don't want that.
Yeah.
I don't want that, I should speak for
No, you're
myself,
absolutely
but
right.
Okay,
we want, you know, leave a lot of this open, and maybe, you know, put a riparian buffer here where a trail could go maybe there.
okay.
But, you know, I think kind of what we were talking was putting the majority of the units here and then dispersing the traffic. Don't,
Diffusing it,
we
yeah.
don't want a big 4-lane road or a big road in Shingle Springs, because
Understood.
it takes away from our rural characteristics.
Good.
I think
And then, as Ken said, we do have a diagram on that roadway, and we will look at that soon.
I think the contention there is that those X points are private roads that cannot be connected to without their approval. I think that's.
They're private roads, they're not
private
county
roads.
roads.
But are they public roads that are privately funded? Because that's what our district is, and we can't stop anybody from coming through our roads.
Where's your road?
Ours, we run all the way from Trotter, coming off of French Creek, and then back out to French Creek and Holland.
Down in here?
That whole road coming off, where it comes
Okay.
off at the bottom.
Yeah, I don't know
Goes all the way around, but we've been stopped twice because years ago, our people wanted to put gates on that and stop the people. Can't do it. They said, yeah, you're a private road.
Okay.
I mean, you're a public road that's privately funded. We pay
Okay.
for the road, we build it.
That's
but
from
we
a
can't-
It's a CSD, as I understand.
Can we
Yes,
take
it
those
is a
roads?
CSD.
This is very useful
And from a clear
feedback.
safety standpoint, like you block them all off, right all on one side, if there's a forest fire, everybody has to evacuate, are you gonna force everybody to drive to the fire through us, which is already gonna be, it just doesn't really seem like if you have a choice in the matter, a logical way to plan your ins and outs.
Okay.
That's the big issue with doing that extension. And Maggie Lane also is a privately funded road.
Okay.
That community paid for that road.
Okay.
You know, so,
Good.
and running that much traffic straight through like a highway impedes them if there is an emergency.
Right.
We don't, and this is, not to
We
be too
understand you don't
obtuse.
care about the roads because
No character issue.
Okay, look, the way planning works, it's not linear. So that's why you could start, it's more like a round house, and there's doors on the outside of the round house, and any door you go in, you're gonna get to the center. The way this process works is very iterative. It's not linear, A, B, C, D, E. You have to consider different factors, you plant a flag, you test it out, you try other variables, and then you say, these variables don't work anymore, and then you change it. It's a very complex set of trade-offs. So you have to go through these factors multiple times to get to a result. And it's a little different than A to B to C to D process. So I know you understand that. But so this is still valuable because you can't resolve it finally. You have to look at all the factors, as Ken said. But it's useful to get something going so we can test the ideas along the way.
Well, I think some absolutes though
Yeah.
are, Holiday Lake is absolute, not gonna go through, that's a whole lawsuit thing. Those are, Rick said absolutely,
Well-
you're not putting a through road on our road.
Well,
That's 3 points that are
Those are,
right there.
we have to look at those constraints, Eve.
So, in terms of Joel
Yeah.
McKay's comment about being naive about people going up via Lavenza, I think that's good that he came to that conclusion that that was naive, because it's a 2-lane road, one lane in each direction. I'm driving to Sacramento, I'm not gonna go through a huge development with stop signs in one lane to go out of my way, to go up and around and then back down to Sacramento.
Right.
And I'm gonna go on French Creek Road. And
Right.
so is everybody else that's going to Sacramento.
Right.
And if you're a kid and you're paying $4 a gallon for gas and you might have $8, you're not gonna go 5 miles when you can go 2.
Right.
I think it's also a timing question though, because the Ponderosa interchange being what it is, if it's the wrong time of day, you'll want to go to the Shingle
Right.
interchange. So I mean,
So right now, when I pull out of my driveway, I can go 3 different ways to get on the freeway, depending on, the time of day.
So let's go back to the view one, because we looked at views, and I wanted to get.
I think
Sorry.
Eve brings up an important point, is how people, what road choices they make is based on what their destination is.
Yes.
Of course.
And the key destinations are Ponderosa High School, Buckeye School, and Sacramento, because that's where everybody works.
That's all
Right.
west.
Right, and we've got a whole topic and a set of boards on circulation alone. It's
Okay.
very complicated. I want to go back to views, and so, Matthew, could you bring that one up? We had looked at this, but, and we know this is an issue, so we wanted to get some sense from the group about different ways to deal with it. So, could you explain this diagram?
Absolutely. So, once again, putting on our planners and designers hats, this is how we
This is number 5 in your set.
look at various ways that you can ameliorate views, enhance them actually. We just identified the major roads as locations for these, but these techniques can be done throughout the site in various locations. Basically, as a student of the native landscape, I find it very attractive. You've got some wonderful existing screens out there, and that's something definitely to build upon. It's an inspiration. It's drought tolerant. You're not having to use fertilizers, pesticides, any of that. So that's definitely one approach, is to build upon the native landscape. And so there's a couple of different ways in which you can impact views, change them, enhance them. One is just taking advantage of changes in topography. And that's something we would look at very closely. We look at the existing grades. So if some places down low, it makes more sense to put things down in there, so as you're driving or if you're walking along this road, you don't see anything.
Or if you live across the street,
Exactly.
you don't see that, because it's down and it's screened.
Exactly. And also taking advantage of the
Well, it's
different.
gonna have to be some awful tall trees for
Well,
that bridge.
yes.
to
I know where you're coming from. Not in every, yeah.
Within that.
It's a
positive
bowl.
thing.
So,
The vegetation worked great for the people right across the street from it, and I think
driving on the
that's a
road.
positive thing, and driving on the road, except I don't agree because the vegetation along the road's not really the rural view that you have now.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but it's better than what the housing's saying. But, you know, on your other one, you have the topography of the ridgeline of that hill that goes right up there. And if you're on the back side of that, and then even all the way across that valley, into where you get into some of the oaks, so that you have natural hidden views.
Yeah.
Yes.
And if you do things like that, then you're gonna also protect the viewscape of that ridge line.
Good. So you're talking about, you're saying if you had something in here, you wouldn't see it. It's
You wouldn't
relative.
want it on the French Creek
Where's
side,
the
but if you
board
put it on the
view?
back side.
You're saying that then it's relatively hidden.
Yeah, even from the ridge.
Do you have that view? Yeah. So I think it was B. A or B?
Well, so you
Which one are you
guys don't,
talking about?
He's
they
saying,
don't really have a view from our ridge.
See, he's saying-
We have all of those
he's
views.
saying this block, if there was something on the other side of this in here, he's saying you don't see
The
it.
other side of that I can't see, exactly.
Right.
And I can see the whole valley, I can see all the way up in the oak woodlands, everything,
Back to that other exhibit, where's the one with that?
with the X's.
Put that up. So what Stan is saying is that if you were inside here, you know, some of these, they're in natural
The natural ones, yeah.
draws
Along-
and you don't see it.
And actually, it's up along just the northern route of that thing, the whole topography works that way. I mean, that's the way it goes. I've
That
walked
is
that
true.
thing 100 times.
Again,
There's
you know, you're trying to do the best fit for all view considerations, and it can't be that you don't see it at all, but what you can do is use the terrain
Right.
and vegetation in combination to minimize
Well,
it.
you can also look at the way places, and I'm not sure about some of the backyards, the way Estrella's are laid out. Most
Up in here?
of those places, no, even the lower part, which would be able to see that, but their actual homes are faced away from it.
True. Yeah.
Well, or the other way.
Yeah,
They're
that's
faced
true.
both ways.
That's true.
And
Well,
then-
it's what they have. They
Yeah.
have similar conditions. That,
Right.
it's a pretty nice job. I mean, it's
Yeah.
quite lovely in through there. I mean, it's pretty high quality, I think, we would agree.
High cost.
Well, Frank, you had a hand up before. Just-
well, again, I understand it's difficult to please all the masses, but along Old Frenchtown Road, that all goes to a ridge
Yes.
along there. And so on my end, I think here, where you have on natural resources too, you said provide views of open space from existing residences. You're not going to be able to accomplish all that, obviously, but for all the people that live up on the ridge, they're all going to be looking down on rooftops, and they're all going to be impacted by noise. And, I mean,
On that ridge.
I don't know how you mitigate that. It's an impossible thing to do because the development's going in.
Underground.
Triangle.
Yeah. Well, that's not a reality, but, so there is, so it is impacting on all residents that live on ridges.
No, just,
Not just right
that
there.
triangle.
Yeah.
Wait, we're
Let's
getting off.
That's
Go ahead.
So the development will be impacting the quality of life for all residents that live on ridgeways or ridges, not just those that are on roadway. Obviously, those driving along the development on roads, they're not going to see the development.
if you develop in a certain manner, but for residents that are stuck there, that are planted there, they can't escape the view, they can't escape the noise, they can't escape the light.
Now, I will say this, I mean, along the lines of what you're saying, I completely agree. You're not gonna be able to screen every view from every point to every point. But when you look at some of what's this mature vegetation in here, you have to, as you're driving along, you really have to look to see, oh, there's actually houses in there. It's so densely vegetated, it really is hard to see. So, I mean, at some point, looking over this, even though there would be potential rooftops there, you're not gonna see.
No, you will.
It's
For people that live on the ridges.
You think it's just automatic?
Well, I'll invite you over to my house, I'll smoke
Okay.
some ribs, we'll sit on the deck, have some beers.
Okay.
You can see
Okay.
the pasture lands, whenever a car drives on French Creek, you can hear it. When a cow moves in that pasture, mine will be 100 feet from you.
Oh, you mean, yeah, because
yeah.
the
Yeah.
noise moves out.
Yeah.
Yeah, understood. I understand. Yeah, Stan, you were gonna say,
Yeah, I
can't
think
screen it
what-
all.
Well, no, the reverse of what you were saying is that, yeah, you go and there's thick vegetation up on that ridge and everything. About 90% of vegetation is deciduous oak, so in the winter,
It's
that's
visible.
not true, it's totally visible. Yeah.
But you could plant non-deciduous.
Up on the ridge?
No,
Oh, give me.
Pine trees.
no, in some.
We have a lot of pines, but I'm just saying 90% of it is deciduous oak.
Okay,
So,
but.
so in the wintertime, you can see everything. In the summertime, you can't. So I mean, it's just,
It's a reality.
yeah.
You know, like I say, it wouldn't be, it's still valuable to do these view studies and apply the screening techniques, you know, and there are some things that work better than others, obviously.
I think there's another thing that the northeast corner there where all of the major oak woodlands are from, I think, from the east side of Old Frenchtown and down in those ridges, I think most of the people look the other way. Some of them look that way, but they can't really see back there. They see down in the valley.
So
Just
you
like
think
we do
that
from the other side, right?
there's already some natural,
That's, yeah, you can't see what's in there. I mean, there's some buildings over in there, and one guy puts his bee boxes out there, and he's got enough of them that we can see them from our.
bees?
Yeah, bees,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, okay. All right, so, I don't know, Matthew, was there anything more to explain with regard to these, but the parcels, because I didn't know, I mean, I thought this made it clear to see that in these different colors, so the pink are 10-plus acre parcels, and you can see how they're distributed. 5 to 10 acre parcels in the blue, 2 to 5 acre parcels in the green. This yellow is 1/2 to 2 acre parcels. They vary. You can see how those are distributed. I mean, I think one of the points being that, you know, they're varied, and the average of them together is something to consider, because we talked a lot about, you know, how to break it up, how to draw parcels at the same time respecting the character of the existing surrounding development. It is quite varied from west to east, and we can just see in this exhibit. So that's information.
Let me just point out that one of the things that the community has expressed strong support for is to maintain the existing zoning. And if you look at this as how it's zoned and the land use designations in the general plan, this is medium density residential, MDR. And this is low density residential. How these parcels got created, they're anomalies, I think.
Illegally at one time.
You mean these 2 to 5?
Yeah.
Up here. I mean,
We're not-
this is all, this should all be 5 acre minimum.
The graft was cheaper back then.
People used to just do it and then kind of say, oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah, there was a lot,
Ours is not to wonder why.
Yeah, but anyway, so I mean, this should be low density residential, medium density residential, so you've got a transition
Right,
between the two. Now, in terms of existing zoning designations, this is 5 acre minimum, and this is currently proposed as part of the land use programmatic update to go from AE exclusive agricultural to 10 acre minimum. And to some degree, it's consistent with what Joy was saying in terms of having, more higher intensity development here and less intensive development here. That makes sense from development economics as well, because utilities are available here, and because of the slope you've got to pump sewer from the lower elevations here, and that's an expensive proposition. They have lift stations and so on. So, all of those things kind of reinforce each other. And obviously the county general plan has a sort of transfer of development rights concept built into it, in requiring a minimum percentage of open space and then offsetting bonus for areas that are set aside as open space to allow an increase of density in the remaining space, which is something that's been incorporated in the existing plan to some degree or another.
Well, that's the clustering.
Well, it's not clustering because, in the sense, because what it does is just, you'd have an offset in parcel size. Clustering would be a whole different.
It's like a compression thing, where if you have 1 acre and you have to give 30% open space, then you end up with a piece that's 30% open space and a lot of 7/10 of an acre.
Right.
And that's, it's not clustering, but it's just sort of compressed, but then you have the open space.
Or you have 100 acres,
Okay.
and you set aside 30 acres, and you're going to have 100 units in 70 acres.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah.
Okay, yeah, well, that's good information and part of the background here. So the other exhibits, just to complete our tour of those, the site landscapes, and we can look back there. Matthew, if you'd like to speak from that. So again, this would be number 7 in your package, item number 7. And these are just shots of existing, for the most part. Why don't you just take a walk through there?
Top deck up here, existing, and also ones that we found inspirational in other nearby communities.
Wait a minute, sorry.
Very appropriate. And it's building upon what we were talking about, the views, the trails, natural materials, open space amenities like trails are there. Then looking at the sections of the roads, the width of the roads, the character of those roads, not straight through roads, roads that meander and flow in topography, using the natural landscape and using screening and walking and enhancing it, native plant materials, looking closely, this addresses some of the issues about water quality, looking at the plant materials, lawns require a lot of fertilizer, a lot of pesticides to keep them green. Something like this, you know, almost no water, using native plants.
Those are all existing properties in the area,
Exactly.
right?
Within the general area, so we looked all around the foothills in this general area. Another thing I thought was very interesting and as an opportunity is actually front yards being used, or some of the public right-of-way being used for food production. This is a vineyard in somebody's front yard.
Mhm.
I know olives do.
That's off of French Creek, I think.
Yes, I think it is. Olives do really well in this area. My brother lives just up the road, so I'm familiar with it does well here. And then we also just went down the road a bit and looked at Cameron Park and some of the other areas. And we include these.
Very
Cross
different.
all those off.
There you go, we're all on the same page.
Anybody here from Cameron Park? Okay.
Hopefully different lifestyles. But this
By
is
choice.
not,
Yeah.
this is not where we're headed, okay? This is where,
By contrast,
exactly.
there's a big difference in the
There's a
top of the
huge-
Right,
region.
they're entirely different communities.
Yeah,
Cameron Park and Shingle are
yeah.
quite.
I mean, but I think part of this is trying to translate rural into some kind of design standard. Now, again, I contend whether you had 100 houses or 50 or 250, you could make 50 look really bad if you did that along the bottom. So, point being that we want to also try and capture what we could at least agree are more appropriate landscape design standards than others. And if the top is more what you would expect or would want to see, again, regardless of the number, then that's what could be required to be built.
So you could, I mean, you're gonna
Sure.
sell portions of this to individual builders, right? I mean, they'll build portions. How do you control that? I know you have CC&Rs, but how do you, who's gonna oversee that for each
It's a good-
individual?
That's a good question.
It is a good question, and the answer is there's sort of different levels of answers and different ways it can be done. But the concept overall is this whole thing is a plan development. And as part of the plan development process, you put in place design guidelines that say these are the design guidelines. You put in place CC&Rs that you say, and within those documents, you identify the can-dos and the can't-dos and the should-dos and the shouldn't-dos, and you build a hierarchy of what should be done and how it should be done. And then it's enforced generally by the homeowners association. And usually the way it's done is the builder or developer retains the rights until they've sold so many so that they control it for a long time in order to make sure that it develops the way they're saying it will develop for the people that are buying in reliance on that. And so they have the incentive initially, and then when enough homeowners are there, that becomes self-regulating, and then they get involved. And one of the things that we've sort of come to, I know there's a tension, especially in Shingle Springs, between the idea of controlling everything so it doesn't look the way it shouldn't, and telling them what to do so that it looks the way you want it to, but not what they want it to. And there's a tension there, and we understand that, and that's a challenge. The other thing is...
Well, the tension though, I think new people coming in will be required to meet a certain standard, and they know that coming in. It's a little different from coming in saying to me, we don't like the way your yard is, you better change it. I mean, that's a whole different...
And I'm glad to hear that coming out,
Yeah.
because of course, we hear the other way, which is we don't like to be told what to do, or the color of our house, or the way to landscape our
There's a
yard, or what
balance
fence. And yet, we have to tell these people what they can do and what they can't do. And so, I'm glad to hear that.
But
'cause
if you
it
bring an
makes-
airport into my neighborhood, you're gonna get a lot different reaction than if you build an airport and say, oh, I wanna buy a house next to it.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
the conditions are
Yeah,
different.
that's important.
Yeah, Frank.
Okay, I'm sorry, I came in a little cold in,
That's
so
okay.
we're talking
We're building
about
airports.
some restrictions. Yeah, no helicopter tattoo, I don't know if there was.
How, it's this balance, you want a certain quality
No.
standard, but you want to give people freedom and
Right,
flexibility.
I understand that,
Yes.
but we're talking HOAs, right, to control certain things that can and cannot be done. Now, my question is to you, Joel, just exactly what is the intention of Stino LLP? Are you gonna, is the intention to put building pads in there and then sell them off to a developer? And then, so how can anyone control an HOA? Or is the intention is that your organization will be building out?
Take it all the
I
way.
think, first of all, it's important to the county and to everybody else, including especially the Shingle, it shouldn't matter. But what you get is what the language is, and if it's not done that way, someone has a right to insist that it is. So if it's done properly, the answer should be, it shouldn't matter. And our answer right now is we don't know, because it's a process that we don't know what the project is yet. We don't know what the infrastructure cost is yet. We don't know how it's going to be done. We don't know what the market is. It's something that evolves. And so the point being, because it evolves and because we can't know, it has to be done in a manner that you can rely on. And that's important for the county, it's important for the residents, and it's important for us. And for each builder that builds a house in there that sells it to somebody saying, this is what you're buying, this is what your neighbor can do and can't do, and this is what the rest of the community can do and can't do, it's important for them too. So sort of everybody, in theory, should be on the same page in terms of desiring enforceability.
But if we don't know, we don't know, I guess that's what.
Well, it has to do with the enforceability, but it sounds like the preference would be to have real clarity and certainty about the level of quality standards for building and landscaping. So there's no chance of it being watered down or lowered. No grade, clear. Okay, so.
Yeah, no, I think that's, and you know,
and that's good to know.
and I think this is a perfect example of working through and looking at these different things and identifying, when we get to the design guideline point where we're doing those kinds of things, we'll want to have them done in a manner that we know meets with expectations.
Yeah.
It sets up.
They have to be clear, consistent, and enforceable, residential.
Yeah, well, if the point of something like this is to identify rural characteristics and to say we can implement rural characteristics, that's where it's going to happen. And so we have to be able to demonstrate that there's a way in which we can do it.
Right. Okay, so.
Who's
sorry,
gonna
go ahead.
design
Sure.
the parcels? Who's gonna design where each parcel goes, where the road's going? Is that gonna be you guys or whoever you sell this to?
Oh, okay, then I'm glad you asked it that way, because now I understand a little bit more in terms of what the process with the county is by the time you get whatever entitlement you end up with, which is the right to make
Build a
each
house.
parcel, well, the right to cut off each parcel and sell and build a house there. You've done the grading, well, Brian, maybe it's better for you at least to fill in, I mean, you've done the grading, you know how it's going to be graded, you know how the roads are going to be built, you know everything.
So that it's more than just the individual parts, it's also the total amount and impact and all of that. Recognizing what's out there now, what's surrounding the site, but I'd love to hear some discussion about this. I mean, I don't know what you would add to it, what are the things that are really important here. I mean, I think that these different elements do say rural to me. I mean, at least, you know, as a character, and like we said, in terms of the site landscaping, it's one thing to have very manicured and tailored landscaping and very wide streets versus more narrow, undefined streets, no curb even, no gutter, it just tapers off. These are all things that indicate a rural character environment. But, yeah.
Well, we're gonna have high density. I really think you ought to have sidewalks and curbs. Personally, if I lived there, I wouldn't walk on the sidewalk. I don't know if you do the 5 acre stuff. I'd love it if we had sidewalks on our road personally, and it'd still be rural. But I think certainly where it's high density, that old Fair Oaks, Orangevale thing of no sidewalks and no curbs, is horrible. It's horrible landscape.
Well, there are different ways to do it. You could have, you don't have to have the sidewalks adjacent to the roadway.
No.
They could be separated,
have
which
green
creates
space, yeah.
opportunity for a different landscape feel. Yeah,
I think the issue is the high density.
Yeah.
You know, if you have
Yeah.
high density, you have all the problems. So all those pictures on the top are not showing you high density.
Yeah.
Well,
Right.
yeah,
So we're trying to accommodate high density and make it rural and it's not.
Is that on the table?
yeah.
The elephant in the room here, in my opinion, is the number of, obviously, it's the number of
Absolutely.
rooftops. Joel, you purchased or are purchasing a property with challenging constraints for development. That was a choice you made. And as a community member, longtime community member, I'm terrified of the prospect of doubling the population or coming close to, and ruining the rural character of the community. To the extent you can dial down the number of rooftops, the impacts
Automatically go down.
go down relative to the number of rooftops you dial down.
Right, so
The support, at least for me, would go up
right.
with less impacts. 1,000 is way too many. Way too many. I'll just stop there. If you dial down to existing zoning and you're down near 100 or 110 or whatever, it seems to me the impacts are diminished.
Right.
And I appreciate what we're doing now in terms of the rural character
Yeah.
and these design standards, but sidewalks and street lights and paved roads are a suburban model that, in my opinion, doesn't
Right.
fit. So to the extent that you can retain to this, that's good. To the extent you can minimize the number of homes, obviously that's good. I think at the end of the day, it's going to, in my mind, is coming down to how many people are going to be living
In this
there.
place. Yeah.
Right, that'd be the huge wild card that
That's-
affects everything that we
No,
don't
Tim,
know.
But I'm just-
very well
No,
stated.
well, and I think, I mean, to respond, don't you want me to say something?
Yeah.
It's not my nature, I won't though. Listen back.
Go ahead.
Go ahead,
I wanted to hear
let's hear
from
more. No,
Stan, but-
I'm fine. No,
I'm gonna add on to Tim.
No, go ahead.
Then
Go
you
ahead.
can respond to both
Yeah,
of us.
yeah, go ahead, Stan, yeah.
Because we know what you, on those properties, what you have by rights to build.
Yeah.
We know what bonuses you can get by the types of open space and structures and all that you can do.
Right. So you get a number
So
on
we
it.
know, where the maximum is that you can do now without anybody agreeing to anything. You can just go do it, pretty
Yeah.
much.
Yeah.
As long as you get your EIR through and all that, you can pretty much do
Right.
those numbers. And quite honestly, those numbers is what, if they're properly located and they work within the EIR and all that, that's what I think would pretty much satisfy everybody in the community. And I'm only speaking for myself, but I think that would do it. I don't know if it's economically feasible for you or not, based on input that you get here.
Yeah, and it's, it's a funny formula and process and way to think
Yeah.
about it, because what we think and thought is what we're asking for. And the 1,000, I'm not trying to defend the 1,000 or not the 1,000,
Yeah.
but when I looked at that general
System.
plan, right, and the general plan says that there's a land use here that's in the community region, and the community region has a range of development. And so it's not like I went out and said, I'm gonna try and screw Shingle Springs. It's I went out and I looked at what the county set out in their general plan and said, this is what the future potential for this is. And so we went towards that. I understand the community reaching back and saying, yeah, but we had the zoning in mind, and those are not the same.
Right.
Okay,
That's right.
so right, they're not, but I didn't make this up.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
That didn't
Right.
I didn't even ask for it, it was
Yeah.
there. So
Yeah.
that's where I'm coming from. And the situation that I'm hearing, okay, is one that something less than 1,000 and something more than 129 is something that we need to work with.
101.
But
We didn't say more than
and
that.
I'm not, listen, I'm trying to, you're asking a question, I'm trying to
Yeah.
respond
Sure.
and explain.
Yeah, yeah.
Is because there is a lot of there are a lot of competing interests and competing thoughts here. And when you talk about trails and possibly a ball field and possibly linking to the downtown, which people want to see restored or improved or a themed development there, that's a goal too for a vibrant community. And so in all of that, it makes some sense to try and see if that can be realized.
I think if you build the 101, as we're talking about, don't build a trail, and don't build a ballpark, everybody would be much happier. So I think we're kind of mixing
Yeah,
a little bit.
but see,
Because
it's
we
the
want
problem.
to avoid that.
No, but
Forget the
you
amenities.
can't, well,
Yeah.
but you need sewer and water.
Yep.
Because you have to have sewer to do some of that, not just for me, but because that's the way the
Yeah.
county, it's
Yeah.
there and it's been an investment and this is an area identified for that. And so you can't build those low numbers and make your sewer cost and have a marketable product. And so there's, it has to work
There's some
for
pushes and
everybody. And
pulls.
so one of the purposes of this is to try and identify what the things that can be done to make it fit within the community and understand what works for the community.
Part of that
And
is
then-
the mix, though, the number.
No, I understand, but what and the reason we didn't open with a discussion about what should the density be is because, one, we probably wouldn't get very far in terms of a productive discussion, but the other is, the other things that we're talking about are factors that you have to plan into it, and eventually they'll reach a density range just by themselves, right? If you need roads and you need sewers and you need to consider trails because you have to, and you have to set aside open space, and you have to do all of these things, you work towards what it can support. And then you look at the market and you see if it works for a viable project. And so we needed to understand what we should put in and how we should think about it before you can get to a question of whether it's a viable project.
Right,
So we have to take this discussion and move forward with it. There isn't an answer of units here yet.
okay, let's have Eve and
Yeah,
Joyce.
that can completely change the entire nature of everything we're talking about right now in an instant, as soon as you come back with a number of units.
Right,
If you come back to us with 900 units, this is just,
No,
right,
but
Wasted time.
agreed. No, we understand that. It will come
so
down to
there's a
the
bit of
number.
good faith on both parts, but like you said, that's a huge elephant in the room. That can change everything in a heartbeat.
Yes,
No,
no, we appreciate that.
understood.
Okay.
There's no secret about
Let's-
what you're looking
Right.
at.
Eve and Joyce.
EID started building out sewer plans based on Eldorado Hills projections of growth. That didn't happen. That doesn't mean Shingle Springs has to step in and
Take
provide
it
the
all.
sewer hookups to pay the bill for EID for what didn't happen in, what's it called, where the golf course is?
Oh, Sunstein and Serrano.
Serrano, yeah.
Okay.
So, we don't need to pay their bill, we don't need to transform or destroy Shingle Springs to support the sewer line. That's not our responsibility.
No, I think,
Okay, Joyce.
What was I going to talk about? Oh, yeah. Well, we have Holiday Lake, which is, and Estrada, I can never remember their name, with much higher density than we are back where we are.
Yeah.
And personally, I would not want to see, Sugar's going to be developed, and it could turn out a thing where he sells it in half, they split in half, they split, till you get down to 5-acre parcels. Sure, maybe the view's a little better, although if we get all that open space, we still get the great view. But we also get the hiking trails, walking trails, horse trails. We're not going to be land-bound where we are now. We're going to get something really good for the community, but if we keep the density up there, and I'm not saying how many houses I have in mind, I'm sure 1,000 is way too many, but
Yeah.
you have the access up there to maybe take those places, and it really isn't going to influence the character of what goes on down here, but it's going to give Shingle Springs a whole lot of benefit for the community. We're going to get a lot of things we don't have now.
Yeah.
We have none of that stuff.
So you're saying that there's benefit to looking at it as a unified planning area?
Yes, as long as we can keep any density up high
Right,
and get the, and I'm not kidding about donating open space. You guys save a lot in tax money.
Well,
To something like the American
you
Conservancy.
don't even have to donate it, because they have money to buy it.
No, they don't. They don't.
well,
We
okay.
talked to them. But give a big benefit to the community, which I see this is kind of heading that way, where we can gain a lot from it. We may have to give a little on density. We don't have to give 1,000 on density certainly, but the access could be handled up at that end more than what's happening
Right.
down here.
Okay, so we have Bill and then Tim.
I keep saying we gotta broaden our focus. We gotta broaden our focus, because let's say they come up with a medium density that we can live with, and they add hundreds and hundreds of people. They need services. Very soon, they'll want stores, they'll want restaurants, they'll want to build a lot of commercial businesses up along Mother Lode, wherever they, I mean, it's gonna have a downstream effect. So, I mean, we don't just wanna think it's only gonna be that many houses there and that's the only impact. It's
There's
gonna
other
be more.
secondary, tertiary
Tertiary,
effects.
That's when you start getting into having your committees that are setting
Well,
up to
you
decide
got,
what
they
goes
have a number of us now, you got
into
hundreds of people in Stino who, they have more voices than we do. They're gonna get their way.
Okay.
Well,
But
that's what the
wait.
community plan that you're trying to do would direct it
Well, you
to
would-
the downtown, so it wouldn't be.
Shaping,
But it's already
It's always
busy.
on that
you would be
road.
shaping that. Okay, Tim was in the queue and then Stan.
Yeah,
Was there also?
well, yeah, I agree there could be benefits to the community with hiking trails and whatnot. But there's also a price to pay for that, you know, traffic.
Trade-offs.
There's a community price, and right now we're focusing on the Stino development individually, but if we take a couple steps back, look at it collectively, in the whole region, this development has the potential to spur leapfrog development elsewhere, specifically further down the road.
Further south, you mean?
Further south.
Being down French Creek?
Yeah. So that's a concern. We need to look at the community collectively and not put our blinders on and make decisions on one developer
Right.
proposing one
Well,
development. I know we can't do much about that now, but.
well,
it's something
presumably
like-
that's why you have a general plan. It's supposed to be a framework. Well, that's the theory of it, so that wouldn't happen. But it, I mean, anybody can change anything. A
Here we are.
future board
Well, you know,
can do that, I
One of the things,
understand.
just with the fact now that we have it assembled in its current, if we don't develop it, because at a certain point it becomes infeasible and we don't, the different property owners are not gonna just decide they're not gonna want to develop their land, but they won't be unified, because they're not naturally
We don't have to
tied,
be
you know, they're not.
unified, though, they could do, I mean, you
But what
could
I'm-
have a greenstone in the bottom,
But-
you could have a.
No, I-
Exactly, I guess, and that's what I'm sort of
Yeah,
responding
and
to,
that's
which is that with the mixed densities, it
Yeah.
may be a way to look at it now, because otherwise, they may each be looking for
Right.
a piece of higher density and a piece, you know, so
Okay, so if, in other words, if you could get to a number people could live with, you have the features you wanted, and the trade-offs, you kind of make a deal and you can maybe create a stable, predictable future. So there's some benefit in that. If you met all of those tests, we can live with the number, the impacts are manageable or mitigatable, the character is what we want, it's a unified plan, it works together, it does give us certain amenities or benefits, wow, that's what we want. And it does come down to, can we live with the number, because that is the number does drive impacts. And that's what you're looking at.
And that's overpass.
That's right. It has a lot of effects, and on the positive, there is also the fact that there would be more chance for healthy rural town retail. I mean, one of the reasons why retail suffers in some of these communities, because there's just not enough rooftops. But you might say, well, we're willing to live with less performing retail because we like the rural character and lower numbers of people.
Or we can go to Folsom for retail.
I mean, I was hiking the.
Placerville has retail.
Yeah,
River
so-
Park has
so you don't
retail.
need
It's
it.
not that far.
Exactly, I mean, I just did the JMT and finished it off this year, and I went through Monitor Pass in Markleyville, that little town with one gas pump. That's a cool little town. And it's a great character, you know, you could still see what it looked like, you know, 150 years ago in California.
County seat of Alpine County?
It's the county seat of Alpine County. And it's a 24-hour gas pump, and I was glad to find it because I needed gas. Otherwise, I would be pushing my...
$18 a gallon didn't bother you.
It was $5 a gallon. So you were next in the queue.
Yeah, I just want to throw the other elephant out there, and that's Measure Y. And
Another elephant, there's not enough room.
well, that's a
What
big
is
one.
Measure Y?
Serious?
Yeah, I don't know Measure Y.
Oh, okay. Measure Y restricts increasing by development any of our roadways with like 6 exceptions to a service level of LOSF.
Oh, okay, that's an
And
existing,
we're there on certain segments already, so.
okay.
Of course, most of this would come out in the EIR.
Right.
Based on the number of units.
That's
that
right,
put
you
in.
do a trip
But it's going to be a
generation.
restricting factor, so work with us.
That's a
we'll
pretty
work
tried
with
and
you,
true
and that's-
methodology there.
And we know, well, and they have their new traffic demand model, which is still,
Yeah, Joel, we were talking about, this is the Kimley-Horn model, is that who's doing it?
Yeah, but it's not gone public yet, so.
Oh, okay.
it's,
But it will be the tool that the county uses to gauge.
they're playing with
traffic.
it already. I mean, they're in there playing with it.
Yeah.
So that,
Okay, go ahead, Ken.
That goes back to us, all of us here, I think needing to come back and see what your numbers look like, because you start talking traffic density, and in the morning already, we've addressed that, is if you try to leave, between 7 and 7:20, and you hit Ponderosa Road from Motherlode, you're sitting there and you're stuck.
Right.
So if you have such a low density, I mean, it's all a balance. If you have such a low density that nothing gets done with that interchange, then you're gonna be severely impacting with numbers and not fixing anything. Whereas if you go, and I don't know any answers, I'm just raising this as an issue, is if you reach a certain number and the requirement then kicks in that the county and the development pay for like a dedicated onto the freeway lane, whatever that's called, that makes a huge difference in how we're all impacted by traffic. So I guess ultimately what I'm saying is, this is a nice meeting, but until you come back with something we can look at to discuss these individual things, then I think it doesn't really resonate on what those numbers
No
mean.
matter what the 10 fees are, Stino
Right.
can't pay for the traffic improvements that are
Okay,
required.
being necessary.
Okay.
For
Just
Ponderosa,
follow
you
up
mean?
on
Yeah,
that
for-
why.
For
Yeah.
Ponderosa.
Just to.
go ahead, Stan.
A little, Ponderosa is recognized as LOSF right now. But even more importantly, which doesn't, it doesn't affect me personally or anything, but they also, the Department of Transportation has recognized the segments in the El Dorado Hills area on 50 as being LOSF. And additionally to that, they have no plans to improve that road outside the Silver Valley Parkway interchange for the next 20 years. So that's a contingency factor that could play into the whole quantity.
Does play.
Right,
Well,
that's,
we'll see.
it becomes a governor on the engine, it's a
Yeah,
limiter.
yeah, that's all.
It's a
Well,
limit.
and I think to answer Ken,
Yeah.
and just to respond, which is that even if we came with some, brought it back to talk the density numbers in terms of their traffic impact and in terms of what the mitigation that they would pay for that would be required, all that's the EIR, that's
And
the
that's what
traffic
you're gonna
study.
have
And
to-
so
They have to do.
what I'm
And that's what
trying
he's gonna
to
look at.
make sure everybody understands is even when we come up with the next plan that we want to have the EIR evaluate, for us to put it out and everybody say, oh no, that's too much, it won't work, is prejudging, because we won't know until we do a full traffic analysis.
Yes.
And it will be a full traffic analysis that the county scopes, that is done by so it's,
We don't know precisely, but we have a pretty good idea.
Okay, I'm not,
We all know that
wait,
if you put a bunch
Tim.
of homes in, there's gonna be more traffic.
Right.
I don't need a model to tell me there's gonna be a lot of guys driving around.
And we're already at half.
but all I'm saying is the study, like for Ken, it has mitigation that says this is what you can do and this is what it will do
Okay.
to the traffic.
And then you have to decide if it's worth it.
Exactly.
that's right,
Yeah.
this is very good, excellent. So, and this is very useful feedback on many levels, but could you also look at number 13 here in the package, so these houses. Gotta love this. No, again, it's kind of a trial balloon sort of thing, but if you don't put something there, we don't know. And potentially, these are some of the character homes that could be considered, or that are being considered, and I wanted to get any feedback. I mean, do you think these are,
They're all nicer than my house.
I think,
Well, very much in my house.
I think every one of these homes has been built over off South Shingle, south of Bandon Road, or north of, yeah. I think all of these exist out there in that ranchette. They're nice homes.
They're nice.
They're big.
Are they,
Milton Ranch has some of these in there too.
Yeah.
they're appropriate? I mean, they
Well, I think what we,
speak.
not so much what these look like, because they're all gonna be nice homes when they build them. What I'm more concerned about is how high they go, if they are close to a site place. I don't want somebody looking out their bedroom window in our pool, you know, so that's where I'm concerned about.
So,
I can see your pool in my house.
Oh, God. Are you the one using the telescope across the Oh, geez. Well, you're not getting a very fun
Better
view,
shape
I'll
up.
say.
And the other elephant in the room.
It's still-
I know you can't answer it yet, but what price point these houses would be, and I know we're not there, we can't get there,
not even close.
but that would also be another.
You know what, actually, what I'd love to hear though is kind of what that means to you. In other words, your concern is that
They'd be higher or lower?
it won't be of a high enough
Comparable.
cost point
I don't
to
want
bring in
somebody
people
who's
that,
low,
okay.
who can't afford to buy a house in Folsom, to just keep coming up here, driving and buying one of these houses, just
So
at a
you're-
default. And,
So you want it at a high enough point
There are a
to,
lot of people
I don't want this to be the economic alternative to Folsom.
Let me share something with you, because I think it's important just to put that out there, because one of the things that obviously we look at is what is a target market? You know, what is it you're looking at? And from what we've seen and what we've talked about, the idea is that somebody that's gonna come to Shingle Springs to buy a house here, they're looking for something that isn't El Dorado Hills, or isn't Folsom. They want something that does reflect more of the rural look. Even if their house is smaller, their lot's smaller, they're coming to Shingle Springs because they like the idea of moving away and not recreating where they moved to. You know, they're not gonna move from from wherever it is, Metropolis or Rancho, whatever, to go into a place that's back to that. They're looking for something that's different, more consistent for their kids, for whatever. It's a different market than the El Dorado Hills market.
Well,
It's a
the question is, I mean,
different
two
thing.
ways of looking at it. One is, are these gonna be houses that are more expensive than what they're gonna be building in Folsom? And people will bypass Folsom, more expensive house in the country? Or are these going to be price pointed where, oh, I can't afford Folsom? So I'm thinking,
Yeah.
it depends on the price. If these are gonna be cheaper or more expensive than what's in Folsom.
I think if we look at what Matthew's doing right now,
I think you're looking at a range.
if you look at what Matthew's doing when he's talking about higher density and middle density and
Yeah.
lower, there's definitely a range.
But I think if you take a look, if you're talking about the ranchettes, you're gonna get a higher level, you're gonna get some of these puppies here. Again, the Milton Ranch, the greenstone type houses are higher than any of our houses cost, you know, that are in there, and it develops out that way. But as you get into the higher density, then the actual cost of the units are gonna come down some, because that's just the nature of the beast. And the higher proximity, and you're gonna get a little different personality trait of the people who go in there. I mean, it's just natural. I mean, but you have to look, even historically, like in our area, we're going into some homes, I just told you, we got some homes now that are turning over that are the grandchildren of the grandparents that built the house. And the house isn't very big, and it was really cheap when the people built it.
yeah,
You know, but now it's a moderately priced house.
yeah.
And then, you know, right next door to that, we got somebody that built 10 years ago, and they put some big bucks in the house.
Yeah,
You know?
sure.
So
You
it's
get-
very eclectic
Yeah.
throughout that whole area,
Yeah.
and people don't care. I mean, the
Yeah.
ones that move there
Yeah,
just don't care that much.
yeah.
You guys got some really shoddy stuff out past you. I mean, if you go down across the
Right.
creek, you know, that's, I mean,
Yeah, it's just,
Right.
it evolves over time, and some of them go back
So if
and
you're
add
doing it
on.
all plan-wise, though, you get a segment, a cross-section, I
Okay, Eve.
I'd like to raise one more issue that goes right to the density
Sure,
question.
good.
And that is, Joel, what you said is that this was within the CRL and that you were given to understand what the, what was
County.
allowed within the CRL.
Yeah.
And when the general plan was passed and the Shingle Springs residents voted, nobody knew what a CRL was. And there is not just a little movement, but a big movement right now to remove that CRL, to condense the area of density to what is along Mother Lode Drive there and in town.
Yeah.
And so when we're talking about developments 5 years from now, 10 years from now, if this doesn't go and we're faced with, the next person that wants to develop it, it's gonna be different, because we're not gonna sit back and allow this kind of density to go into that whole region. That somebody drew a line and said that's your CRL.
Yeah.
So that's going away.
So
So the Jack Sweeney dictatorship is on its way out, he doesn't know it yet.
Oh, did you mention Jack?
So, in other words, the policy context could change while other things change. There's a lot of things are in motion.
Yeah.
So, understood. So let me do this. I'd like to call your attention to this diagram. So Matthew has been sketching. This is kind of inspired by Joy and Joyce, what you were saying about what goes where. So it's probably not perfect. It's obviously done quick on the spot, but it's a way to try to give some picture to what you were saying. And again, without regard to units, and we said here, it does all come down to the total number of units with respect to impacts, but there's still a layout. So Matthew, could you just explain it and what you kind of tried to reflect here from the conversation and how that ended up here?
Daniel, if I may, and I apologize, my name is Aiden Barry and I'm
Yeah.
State. Before we actually get into the plan discussion, just have one kind of commentary that might facilitate, and I'll keep it short, I promise. My name's Aiden Barry, I'm with the True Life Companies, and again, my apologies for being late. Also, I want to just completely compliment and respect all of your time for coming out today. It is amazing for you to give up your time on a Saturday to come out and participate in this. This is not a wasted effort. I am associated with a firm that we're a real estate investment firm. This is what we do for a living as far as looking at opportunities and investing our money into those opportunities. We have decided.
You're related? Okay.
Yeah. We have decided to enter into a relationship with Joel on this specific opportunity. What I wanted to do before we get into a discussion of the plan is identify something just as a commentary to yours that things can change. And I recognize there's a movement relative to the community region boundaries. There are always political shifts. There are always opportunities for the needle to change from here to here. And I fully respect that. And it's usually driven by issues that affect you personally. Also, that needle can go the absolute opposite direction. The reason we've decided to partner with Joel is because of his commitment to do work just like this, to partner with the community in creating a plan that works at the end of the day, trying to get everybody on board with a compromise and a set of standards that is a damn good development that works within the community. So I would also, rather than just lose patience and want a number of units at this point, I would continue to show the effort you are today in rolling up the sleeves and working with Joel in coming up with a plan that works for both of you. It won't be, this world is not black and white, no matter how long you how people try to say it. But I would encourage you to continue to work with Joel. We're partnering with him because of his specific skill set in doing these types of developments. I'm sorry for not taking it.
Since she pointed at me, I would like to respond to that. Because by coming in late, you did miss earlier comments. And my point was, Joel's been wonderful. I mean, I don't like necessarily his project. I don't like what he wants to do always. I can't compliment him enough on how he reached out to us and met with us. So we're going to disagree on a lot of things. The process is not the problem. But my point is until you have the later conversation, including density, you can't have an informed decision-making process. So what I was saying is, you can't stop here if you want all of us to weigh in appropriately. You can't say, okay, we've listened and now we're going to come back and here's your plan.
Yeah, no,
that's all I was saying.
I was being fully respectful of that. The one thing I was trying to comment on, And I think it goes to what you said earlier on one of the slides where somebody pointed out, yeah, that's a really nice mailbox, but that's not the point. And I was being really respectful of that.
It wasn't me that said that.
No. I don't know why you think it was me. I was paraphrasing. Continue, please.
I kind of think we are making informed decisions here, because we are kind of seeing what we want, even though we don't know exact numbers, but
Yeah.
like Joel already said, they're not gonna know exact numbers until they they figure out all the logistics of everything, but I feel like we're making some, a little bit of,
saying it's not linear.
a little bit of progress.
That's your point.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then real quick, just for perspective, I'm a longtime community, I've lived here for 20 years. I don't feel that the development team has made a good, I think they stumbled in interacting with the community. I think it was a shitty job.
Yep.
Yes.
And I'm pissed off about it.
Talked to a
So
few
just so you
neighbors.
know, it's been extremely awkward in my opinion, and they're gonna have to do a lot to gain a little bit more trust of the community.
Yeah.
This is a good step.
They've only worked with a couple of neighborhoods in
Yeah,
order to break deals and keep it a
That's the
secret
other
from everybody
elephant in
else.
the room. How come you're dealing with those neighborhoods and
Eliminating others.
Right.
And
Wait, Frank, you were
I
just-
just want to state, I hear you, Ken. Joel approached your group specifically and other groups. However, it wasn't until I went to your house and saw this development, and if you look at Joyce's floor, there's a hole there that you can't see with my chin. Seriously, I didn't know anything about this, because of the notification boundary.
Okay.
So I agree with Tim. I think this corporation did a very poor job of working with the community. The only reason we're here now is because of social media and the uprising that has occurred. So I just want to make that statement.
Okay. So
And we are being patient. That's why we're here.
And that's appreciated. Okay, so, Matthew.
Okay.
So this is, again, trying to respond and integrate comments that you've made here this morning. So
Matthew,
just,
to assist the videographer, if you go the other side of it, no, just go around over there.
Oh, yeah, actually, that's perfect right there. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Don't worry, you'll see this again.
I meant you.
Okay.
you need a pointer.
he wants you in it, Matthew.
No, go
Once
ahead.
again, as Danielle said, this is just an on-the-fly, quick diagram, and this represents how we think as planners. We go very broad, we listen to all your input, we take it in, we process it, and then we try and summarize it in these diagrams. And,
The first button,
okay.
first one.
The other.
No, the other first one. No, that'll help, then you can stay out of the video.
Okay.
Can we have?
Oh, no, you're fine.
No, we agree.
Okay, so the first thing, the first major point going to the beginning of the session was water resources and the importance of protecting the geology, respecting the geology and how the water moves through there. And that's something that we will try and take a look at and acknowledge. Obviously, there's a large body of water through here. The drainage course goes down through there. And that's one of the first things we'll identify and look at that. And sometimes on projects I've worked on before, you set up parameters and you set distances, you look at the geology, you get the geology reports, and you say, okay, we need to stay this far away from that. And so first acknowledgement, protect and enhance existing water resources. The second major issue we talked about was views, maintaining and enhancing the existing views. The views along French Creek Road here, and then also the importance of the views from this hilltop community and recognizing that those need to be maintained and enhanced. Noise travels in very unique ways, and it's always really hard. It depends on how the wind is blowing, the temperature out. You could hear a cow mooing over here if the temperature in the air is blowing the right way. So we will definitely look at ways for sound attenuation, but that's kind of a moving target to take care of. The next major issue we heard about was the whole trail system, and also, or going back a bit, was the idea of connections. And I thought it was a wonderful suggestion, the idea that we look at multiple points of connections instead of just concentrating traffic, say down here and then up here. and that is, in planning school now, that is one of the first things you talk about now, is multiple points of connections, because what it does is it disperses traffic. It gives you multiple ways of getting out of place.
You make it sound like it's being.
Yeah.
But it's the only thing that
Okay.
we really
I'll take the
agreed on.
blame for that.
Okay,
It's a thing for some people. Ball fields are a thing for some people. It's-
okay,
Okay.
it's mixed.
It's mixed, but some type of multimodal connections through the community that provides amenities for the broader community. And that's something that you would all benefit from. If you live down here and you want to ride your bike, you know, suddenly you're going to have an opportunity to ride your bike up through here, or maybe a safer path to travel along French Creek Road for residents or the bikers, and possibly eliminate some of the pedestrian vehicle conflicts. I have 3 little kids. I love to bike. Terrifies me to go on roads with my children. I always head for trails and things like that. Next, this gets into the whole issue of the views over on this area, and it seemed like there's a strong preference to maintain the views out into that landscape right now. And as possible, that we should protect and enhance those, and it seems like a good use that will also seem to be desirable was the idea of sports fields. And
Not there.
okay.
No way.
Yes.
I'm not on the fence with the ball
I
field,
got a
but
howitzer.
maybe I don't like it right there.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a little too
Because
close.
that whole area right there really should just stay the way it is. I think that's.
You're
what-
talking about it more.
Be
It's
up
even from a
by
traffic
the
standpoint,
school, put it
parking.
closer to the school,
That
and
would
the
be a
higher
really
density
bad
people
place
are the
for it.
ones who would even use
Okay.
it in the first
Yeah.
place.
Okay.
I'm not really for the field, but I understand if there is a need for it.
Yeah.
But maybe put it up towards the higher density and the school
Especially
might
if
make
it's-
more
Good
sense.
for the community at large.
Put it where you were gonna put the Via Lorenz extension.
Yeah,
There you go.
okay.
Right in this area?
No, Rob, they were gonna build that
To the
extension
right or left,
north,
right
it's
there.
off the property.
So the fields on the offside.
It could be, he's just saying it could be.
Near the school.
No, they
near the-
Up at the top.
And fields is,
Okay, or
fields
they're integrated into this somehow.
Yeah.
Okay,
And leave that space, French Creek field alone.
yeah, okay,
As much
so
as you can.
address.
Make that
Or-
ranchette.
Or ranchettes, larger.
Make it ranches, yeah.
Yeah.
okay, so the lowest density,
Yeah.
maybe. Okay.
Okay,
40-acre knee farm.
Yeah.
One.
Oh, wait, that
Shivers is
qualify
40.
for our.
Mill
Right.
farm.
That might
Ranch
qualify
at
for our
Sunset,
micro
Just
farm.
low density.
Micro farms?
Yeah, low density.
Okay.
Okay, so why don't you explain the green, the yellow,
Goat
and
milk
then.
cheese.
Okay, so then the red represents higher density housing, and then as you go down through the site, basically the density gets reduced.
Yeah, I think
There
you're
is-
missing the opportunity about the backside of the hillside.
Right here,
Well,
it
he
says,
recognized that.
provide, this one was.
He's saying,
Use the topo.
yeah,
Tucking some homes there.
Tuck into home.
Right.
Take
But those
advantage.
could be medium.
No,
We're
where
not
you
gonna
have
go
lower
high.
density on the right-hand side of it, there's actually an opportunity for higher density. Because
here?
because it's
In
hidden.
between those.
All right, in
yeah.
there.
Between the hills.
There's a ridge,
Well,
right?
it's hidden and the sound is.
There's kind of a ridge
Yeah,
right
the
here.
sound is very
Yeah,
important because of
that's-
that bowl, and you've mentioned that
Well,
before.
again, it's,
Believe me, I
this
heard
would
that
have to be
before.
refined.
Yeah, a little bit.
Obviously, it's
Sure.
very, very,
Very
rough
broad brush.
You can say
schematic.
medium
Let me have the
density
red.
instead of lower.
Yeah,
I was just.
Joel was saying
I have this all queued up, and I was about to ask.
in here.
Actually,
While he's doing this,
Isn't that what you were saying?
Well, actually, if you look at where the hill is.
It was in, wasn't it in here?
Any thoughts
Yeah,
on
it's
the
right.
streetlights?
Yeah, thoughts are as few as possible.
Yeah.
How about no streetlights?
But I think,
Okay.
it becomes a safety
So-
issue. Those are lights, and then at some intersections, you're
Right.
required.
Yeah, no,
Perfect answer.
They're
But-
gonna do the ones that don't shine up into the air?
Yes.
lights,
Lighting.
yeah, there are baffles that control that.
The simple
That
answer
would
is
be
as few as
absolutely
possible.
necessary.
I mean, I
Yeah.
respect
It is
that.
You don't get a
possible
lot.
and properly structured.
You don't, unless the county requires it, but you can probably, they don't.
Only for
Only at major intersections and
Right.
public safety.
Yeah.
Okay.
We don't go put streetlights every 200 feet down the street so I can get in.
So,
You don't
again,
have to have them. They're gonna be shielded.
one of the big points was, what the big points was,
Shielded in the very bare minimum.
right, higher,
Yeah, and that's the
lower.
CCNR part of
That-
that too, where you control the extent to which.
That
they
key
do floodlights.
distinction there. Tim, go ahead,
I
Tim
have
and
a
Stan.
concern though, the way you've drawn the road hooking up to Buckeye.
Okay,
I would say no. I mean, personally.
Here?
Yeah.
Don't hook up.
That would be a disaster.
You want to offset it,
Yeah, I don't want people on Buckeye Road,
okay.
You're
period.
gonna go there.
Well,
Okay.
They're gonna go
wasn't
there.
what you were talking
But
about?
don't go there
tonight?
more if it's an
That's right.
four-way intersection.
Right.
The one that was gonna connect.
Do not connect to Buckeye.
Well, it could be, there could be some other way of distributing that.
Right.
Right.
You could,
Why not connected to Buckeye, just because of the high traffic in the
It's a great,
school?
it's a great objective.
Yes, the school traffic now is, I mean, 12 years straight of probably kids out there.
okay,
Right.
let's
It's
just say,
increasing, it's okay, but if we start encouraging homeowners to go that way, it's gonna hammer that intersection.
you know,
They're
this
not
would,
gonna-
They're
let's
gonna come
study
in
this,
from another direction then.
let's study
They're,
the
they're
options.
gonna be going on Buckeye and going on Shingle Road to get to the highway.
Okay,
Yeah, but there's a cutoff. They're proposing. a
That's what they're
No, no,
proposing.
no,
we
Against
don't want
that
that.
neighborhood's will.
That cutoff
Okay,
is
it's
gone.
not gonna happen.
Even
Some kind
if
of-
they use that cutoff, they're gonna use that and then come back down.
okay, maybe there's, study some options here, there may be different ways to configure that.
Because that cutoff goes right through.
I think it's a great objective that Tim expressed, that they don't. I think just people in general, if they go to Motherlode, it won't matter if it's offset. If they're going to the freeway, they're gonna take Buckeye. They're just gonna do it. I
That's
take
my
Buckeye.
concern.
For
It's
my
gonna
area, I
suck.
take Buckeye coming off.
You know what's
First
gonna happen, if that happens, they're going to throw in
But what I'm saying.
freaking stoplight at Buckeye and Shingle
Exactly,
Road.
that's right.
Boom.
But
You know,
And
that's
others-
not what we want. That's a rural school, it's awesome.
I
I mean,
understand.
kids walk around, it's tucked away, it's quiet.
Okay, then we should study the circulation patterns.
Stan's point is that they're gonna do it.
What would we-
no matter
Yeah.
what. Even if
I
it's.
don't-
No, I understand, no, I agree, it's gonna be hammered one way or the other,
If
but.
they come out on Motherlode, which they almost have to do,
No,
there's no any other alternative,
Right.
then people are gonna take Buckeye
Yeah.
in order to get to the freeway.
It's a
Anybody going
problem.
to
I
the
mean,
freeway.
I don't have,
It
I
is a
don't think we
problem.
have a good
Now-
solution yet.
And I do those roads all the time, for meetings in Placerville and Sacramento and everything. And I come out, if I'm going to Placerville, I just stay on Motherlode and go all the way. If I'm
Yeah.
going south, now I use
Yeah.
that, if I were over there, I would be right out.
Okay,
What
so-
about at 8 AM now? On a snow day?
So,
I do, I go through
you
there.
know,
You just sit, wait.
the other thing to do,
Where?
no,
I'm sorry.
It's backed up, stop and
school?
go. Yeah, it's a complete stop.
the other thing to do in line with Tim's concern, and I would share that, is really calm the road down there even more, so you're forcing cars to move very slowly since that's a child zone.
It's gonna
And
be,
They don't
I agree with you.
you could do things to the road design that would force cars to move very slowly.
It backs up now.
Anyways, even do that now.
Right.
But I suppose people are dropping their kids off and picking them up, and that creates
Well,
congestion.
the biggest problem there is the design of the roadway in front of the school. There's
It's-
just-
It's
That's
not
what
a
I'm saying.
problem
There's no
right
turn
now.
lanes, there's no-
It's okay right now.
But so I'm saying
It's
that
gonna be a problem with more of the traffic.
that it should be addressed somehow.
So I'm just, so you're saying no road at all, no exit?
No, I'm not saying that. Obviously,
No,
we
I'm
need,
just trying to
that's
figure
the
out.
main, no, I'm saying don't hook it up to Buckeye.
So don't run it across,
Straight across.
Don't,
straight across?
Don't line it up.
don't align it to Buckeye to encourage people to keep going.
Even more. He's saying, slow it, offset.
You're gonna have to offset, I would prefer to offset or study options to discourage that
Through
flow of
traffic.
traffic to the elementary school, which is a
Right.
super cool rural school.
And-
It's awesome.
Yeah, and
It's great. And
I'm
that-
saying they're usually, you have to dig deeper into that issue.
No, right, no, I don't expect an answer.
Right,
Could you
yeah.
direct that traffic more to Greenstone? Could you kind of get more of a?
Not if they're going to Sacramento.
No, they're not gonna turn go that way.
Perhaps the approach to take is what we agreed on down here, is where we have multiple points of entry and access. And then we can look at, so instead of your, one big grand entry, there are multiple points of entries here. Because what I'm afraid of is, I've run into this with the offsets, the traffic engineers hate them. And it actually creates more of a traffic hazard. And then you have
Because you have more complicated turning movements.
Exactly, and you get a bigger headache. I have 3 kids, I know exactly what you're talking about, the drop off. It's a total nightmare.
And there's a competition now with Montessori School and Buckeye School.
Yeah.
With that left turn, right turn thing,
Yeah.
because the schools are across the street.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that school's going to be expanding, the Montessori school's expanding too.
So it'd be cool to create like a school district, a school zone that is protected and makes the children safe, regardless with or without.
The development with larger parcels.
Where? Off the property?
No, I'm talking about Joel's existing plan. And that it addressed the concerns of the folks in Lost Creek and addressed apparently the concerns of the people to the north of Lost Creek. And also fit in with the topography and the oak woodlands. And I think that lotting plan is generally, would probably be generally acceptable.
Which one are you talking
These
about?
are the portions of the current proposed project that he's referring to.
In this area, in this area.
On this edge?
Yeah. Well, both. It's actually in both.
Yeah,
both
through
edges.
here, along that edge.
Yeah.
You think that lotting is okay, more or less?
I think that certainly the people in the room and where they're pointing to is the issues along Frenchtown, around French Creek, and down at the bottom of the project are the primary areas where the density is being discussed.
So there was a buffer, agreed upon buffer
Yeah.
zone that protected your interface, and then there were larger parcels.
Large, yes.
Attended to that buffer zone.
Right, yes, I understand, yeah. Okay, any other feedback or comments? Again,
Will there still be houses in the tree zones, right?
yeah,
So would the
potentially.
tree in that red area be to the right and the green?
Yeah, potentially, yeah, they would be, but
Some
then
in
you'd have
gray
those
there.
larger
Right,
lots.
okay.
So it really feathers out. It's like that's a feathering concept, they use that term sometimes. And it serves as a buffer because
Okay.
the house would occupy a much smaller percentage of the total lot. And you could specify where the house has to be relative to that to maximize the buffer. So yeah, you could create a pretty solid buffer all along there as well.
And if you look at this community on Google Earth, you'll get a sense of how that could work.
Can you get it?
Yeah, sure. It shows exactly what we're talking about. You have the house is pulled fairly close to the road. They still have some privacy, but the actual lot might extend way out into here.
So zoom out a little bit. This is the Vega Loop, just so people can get a bead on where they are. So this is the Holiday Lakes. Right?
Yes. Gotta be the lake.
Does that have access to those or is it?
Okay. So
And how would it be open to more people or no?
No, essentially it's private dealing.
Would they negotiate a biking trailer or horse trailer that would benefit them?
I would say not a chance. Just guessing based on my experience.
so Joel, this is that bridge. This is where you were. Isn't this what you were talking about? This is relatively hidden inside here, right?
Right, exactly.
And here's another area, so you can see. how that works.
The first part you showed is true, the second part is not gonna be true for some
This,
areas. Yeah.
more this.
That is, yeah, that.
This
area
is higher
more
here,
different.
this is higher here, this is lower.
Correct.
I didn't bring the right adapter because I had Google Earth layers that include the existing body plan. Actually, I could send you the layer.
An old plan, the original
Yeah,
plan?
right, that would be good. Because then you can see what I was talking about the existing lot plan.
So we
could talk about after.
I was unclear about, Matthew, you said you were suggesting that there might be multiple
I think
points. Could you, I wanted to confirm that with the group, because I'm not sure that was the case. Could you mention that again? And
So there was a comment made.
wait, hello?
It's tough.
Do you want an entrance right near your house?
I'm sorry.
We're trying to kind of drill down and understand the comment about multiple points of entry
In this way.
in the southern area. And if we could get some more specifics about that.
That's really,
Talking about-
along the finish out is really steep angle, I guess you must have.
Can you,
Really, you know what would help?
You don't want that, do you?
And the property
If
doesn't
you
really.
change that to topographical mode,
You gotta change it to map, and then there's a terrain.
that gives you the elevations, and it's,
Where is
It's
it?
a pretty big bank
go
there.
up to map.
You're on Google Earth.
I'd hate to see an entrance off
I
of
can't see it.
Old Frenchtown
Right
Road.
by.
For a couple reasons.
It won't happen.
Yeah, it's
Goes
just
straight
One
up.
is
too
we
small
don't
of a
connect.
road.
It-
Okay.
it probably
you can't have a connection here.
So I'd say no
There's
there.
no opportunity for connection along
Right,
there.
right.
No,
No.
What's it, what about?
There's a gate on French Creek that goes into the property. I don't know whose property it
That
is.
goes into the graveyard.
The graveyard?
Yeah.
Can you guys
The
go
historic graveyard.
near the cemetery somehow?
That's Stacy's property.
Skirt it? They can't go around it?
No.
So,
They'd have to go
They're
above.
not gonna give right away.
so my
Yeah.
question is also on French Creek Road, is it desirable or not desirable to have more than one point of entry?
I'd say if you're gonna get onto French Creek, there should be more than one point of entry.
Okay.
I don't know if we want to get on French Creek. It's already,
Well, they
Well,
gotta
they
go
also
in
can't,
there.
they have to, I think there has to be this too.
You know, the best point of entry.
well, there's other,
Go
Best
ahead.
point of entry from French Creek is not at the lower end. The
Yeah.
best point of entry is right directly across from Lorraine. There's always already a four-way stop there. It would make it a five-way.
Right there.
Right there.
Right.
The one right there.
Right.
It's right here.
Yeah, but you'd want to curve up around that mountain, I mean below the hill.
Oh, come around the hill.
Come around the south side of the hill there. Go south from there, southeast.
Go where?
The southeast end of the property. Now go east.
Around the hill.
Yeah, just like
Yeah.
that, just like that. That would be the most.
Don't you think that would get more people from the project coming out, because now it's a
It
shorter
would.
shot?
Yes,
So you're
it
gonna
would.
be-
It
you're
would
gonna-
diffuse it off of the Buckeye and the Motherlode.
But there's the-
It would spread it
the
out.
Google
And that is the largest, less curvy part of French Creek is from Lorraine out.
He's right.
The widest.
that's already a complicated
It is.
four-way.
Well,
Everything's complicated.
So you're
Really
saying come in here,
Semi-freeway.
make this the connection? Stan, you were saying make this the connection?
Directly across.
Yeah,
Right there.
Yep.
right there.
Then you're gonna split 50-50 the number of people going out. I mean, that's, and I don't know, Joel, you say
That's-
now that the
well, I don't
interchange
think-
to Buckeye is
Yeah.
no longer part of the mix?
It wouldn't
With
be
a
a.
small, with a reduced project, I think that would not.
So all this is, especially if you avoid Buckeye, all this, no matter where it comes out, is gonna hit Ponderosa Road.
That's
Yeah, it-
probably true.
it's all gonna hit Ponderosa besides the possible Buckeye. What's coming out
Okay.
on Motherlode.
So there would be potentially one there. So there it is. Where else? Is there another point?
Maybe a little further down.
Oh, that should have to be done in
Maybe
the
across
south.
from Trotter?
South, no. Bigger properties.
Doesn't
Oh,
occur.
God.
Yeah, here's,
I don't know, I'm just saying.
You're right.
Just saying.
It's not
You're
going
right.
south. We're going the wrong way.
No, that's all,
south.
We're going
south.
No, no, you're going the wrong way. And that's all the low-density stuff as we agreed.
We still need a way out, though.
Well, I'm not going south.
I'll probably lose Lost Creek at that point.
No, there's gotta be an entrance.
We don't want to
the
encourage
south
people
there.
to go take that way into Placerville. They can jump on Motherlode and take Motherlode, but it's a really bad windy road.
Does the reduced project get you improvements to French Creek Road like you had planned?
You know, you mean the realignment of Shiver Curve? We don't know, you know, it's, this
In my
traffic
mind-
situation is one we have
There's
to,
really nothing there.
to really
yeah,
figure out.
there's no,
There isn't.
north of Lorraine is not really a good.
No, there's no.
Correct.
So you have to go
Village Tunnel.
south.
Correct.
Yeah, to go
You
back.
have to.
The whole, you have
Can
to
you
go
just look
south.
across from
Yeah,
Trotter or
this
no?
can't happen.
No, Trotter's,
Because you're gonna be doing
I'm
houses.
trying to think of the visibility coming around that,
Right there.
They have,
right there. You know?
I think realistically though, if.
This is Lorraine right here.
Yeah.
I think all this is, it's not even arguable, because if you don't allow him enough density to do a bypass around the schools across Motherlode and up to the freeway, I mean, he has to have enough density to be able to afford to do that.
But that bypass is against,
No, we're,
is cutting through another community that doesn't agree to it.
Well,
So that bypass is
okay.
not even existent.
Well, that's not our problem,
Yeah,
It's not,
but
you're
can I
right, it's not
finish?
your problem.
What we're talking about now is not gonna happen, because
No, it's not like, wait a second, because I do take some
Not your
exception to that.
problem, not my
Wait.
problem, that's what she said. It's not
No.
her problem.
It's
So they're
not.
gonna
She's actually
cut
talking a
through it.
holistic.
I'm trying to
So you
explain
can
that
get
if we forget
She's
all
saying it's
that
my
and
problem,
say,
James.
well, we can't do that because it's too near the school, this is gonna be impossible because you can't afford to improve the interchange at Ponderosa. So therefore, we're back to square one, where all the individual developers are gonna come in and divide up little parcels. We're gonna have almost as many people with no improvements.
Okay.
I mean, if you put 200 houses on Shiver property with no road, other road access, which could happen if they're all separate little projects, then they're all gonna funnel out French Creek Road.
Well,
and
they're
there's
gonna
no
have to
better
build a road
interchange.
through the middle of that to be able to subdivide into five. There's no way people
But
are
where are
gonna
you
do
gonna
it.
let them get out?
No, we're not here to
Wait,
help
wait,
them
wait.
solve their problems.
This is still
Let's
theoretical.
talk about both sides of our
I
mouths
know, but
here.
it's still theoretical until there's so many variables interacting. We have to take all of this back. So understood what you're saying. I mean, in concept, yes, there are trade-offs. There are limits as to what can be built, what's affordable. You have to do the calculations. So I think all Joyce is saying is there do have to be some trade-offs.
Well, she said something about if we don't allow you the density
I
to
know.
build this, and that's not what.
No,
I
but partially,
agree.
and let's, just a second here, because this, you're creating now total disillusion of this if you don't address this. So, I mean, I think it's important, because I know there's a perception out there that, like Lost Creek Road and the others that have reached an agreement with the developer, have been saying, screw everybody else, as long as we get our stuff. That's not the case at all. What we've been talking about is, for example, if you develop these three parcels separately, just from a common sense standpoint, say the first one is up on Motherlode Drive, that's developed. And then you've got the lower area, the Shiver property, split into 5-acre parcels through the split
It's only
version.
about 10.
Or, no, yeah, but I'm talking if they get what they want and they split, I'm talking worst case scenario, because that's, when Sweeney speaks at the meeting and says, this project's going in, I don't care what you think, then you've got to take worst case scenario.
Sweeney's
So-
gone,
Well, Sweeney wasn't gone when we started having meetings.
but he is now.
Okay, well, all right, absent that, that's fine.
Why would he say
But
that?
if you, so, but then you've got these,
That's not what.
then you've got the,
Wait, let Ken
There's an
finish.
agreement.
Please, wait.
that was my point, as soon as you get to this point, you're not getting it done.
Yes,
So,
Ken.
so you get that middle parcel there, and I'm telling you our thought process. You're gonna talk over me the whole time.
Come on.
I'm not talking over you.
No,
Go,
just
continue.
Okay.
let Ken finish.
If you want to know our thought process, you can listen, or this is a
Yeah.
waste of time.
Okay.
But then if you develop it into three parcels, Then you've got the Schwack property, which severely impacts not just us, but everyone around it. And you've got a landlocked parcel that by law probably is going to have access to roads. So the thought that we had is, whatever it is, and that's why I keep getting back to what the hell is the density we're talking about? Because if you don't develop this as one unit, we all lose control over where those roads go and who has access. That was why we talked.
I think that's the whole basis for this meeting, is to try and figure out how to develop all three.
And that's why, but as soon as you start saying that the group that we're part of only gave a shit about ourselves, that's just not true.
He's objecting to that. He's saying,
And so I'm saying is there's a thought process that went into what we did when we met with Joel.
But in fairness, though, you can understand how the perception could be there.
And
My
that's why I'm telling
perception,
you.
just on the north side of the intersection, was, wow, the developer paid those guys off. Concessions were minimal because he stands to make millions, if not tens of millions. And that was too bad. And so that's the perception. I think that's the way it is.
And it's all driven by where you're at, and that's not how it works.
okay, well,
You get the facilitator,
sorry.
facilitate a little better.
Sorry, I'm just trying to have us all
You're just gonna
figure
come out
this
name
out.
calling and all that.
We don't
Yeah,
need to
I
go
don't
there.
care.
We're,
We've all been very respectful to you, and
Am
you're
I
not
calling
giving the
anybody
same.
names? Because
No,
that's
Idiot. He's an idiot. That's what you said.
No, that was Sweeney.
But I was swinging.
You asked why he said you're gonna live with this project no matter what.
one at a
Just to
time.
talk about
James.
the Via Lavenza like it's a done deal, and it's not.
It's not.
It's not a done deal, and it is hurting another neighborhood right next to you.
Right.
Without care, that was not even notified about it at all, period. And he has made no contact to even discuss it with the neighborhood.
Okay, look, I think what
I
Joyce
know that to
said
be fact,
is
because I know the
still,
old board, and I'm a member of the new
okay,
board, so.
what Joyce and Joel said, that we're trying to do this in an integrated fashion. It would be in everybody's best interest if we could get something you could all pretty close to agree to. Ideally, that's why you came, the hope, and you've invested the time, and we're still on that path. And yes, we respect the logic that you put forward, and let's just take that at face value for what it is, and hopefully correct some of the misperceptions out there. That's a good thing. So anyhow, we learned something about this, but I wasn't,
One quick question.
one more,
And
Susan.
a little quote here. Want to say, one thing that I was concerned about coming to this meeting is that we are a group of residents, we're a handful of people. I really hope that here we're come to see some alternatives, to give some ideas. I really hope that later this meeting isn't brought out that we are the community and the community has bought in.
We won't
Because
characterize
there
it.
are many of us.
That would not be fair to you, and we said that early on. This is,
That was in the agreement.
you come out,
Right,
you
so I want to
can,
make sure that's
you can say-
understood, because we have many.
we like what's come out, we don't like it, or they didn't really take everything we said, or they didn't take anything we said. If a new plan comes out, you have a reason to either like it or not like it and characterize it as you like. But I would assure you that this meeting will change that plan and is already, in my mind at least, giving us something to work with that would be different than what we would have come in with if we had said, here's another plan, take a look at it. And that really was the intent and purpose. And so, I mean, I think we went through everything. This is what we expected and more. I think it's been a great group. And I respect the fact that you are living here and this is an emotional thing and you want something that works for you and your community. And it's not all the same. Not everybody has the same view even within the community, let alone within the developer team and the community. So it's a complicated thing. I mean, already just in reviewing this, we said, wow, we've tested some of what we heard and we didn't hear everything just right, so we would change it again. And that's what I mean by this iterative process. It's a process of successive trial and error until you get a best fit. That's how this kind of planning process works. Anyhow, James.
To be clear too, Matt, we are here because
Ken.
Sorry,
Yeah.
we do see your point, and that's why we are here.
Yeah.
We do see your point that if obviously the whole thing can be done as one, it's gonna
It's
be
a
more
better-
beneficial to the community. That's why we're here. We understand exactly.
There's
And you know, he
agreement.
did not call you an
And I,
idiot.
yeah, and I apologize for misunderstanding.
I never really thought that for a
You didn't call
minute.
me.
Okay, awesome.
And I'd just like to say that Joyce has been in this community for a very long time and has led a lot of really good efforts to keep the community better, like
Yes.
the post office and the mine and the, all that, the good fights. And I think that you didn't understand that, that Via Lavenza extension, which when I first looked at it, I thought, what a good idea, you just get around all the houses and you dump it onto the road that goes right to the freeway, except for the fact that it goes right down Maggie Lane and in the middle of their neighborhood. Just like it would go, if it was Lost Creek, it would go through the middle of your neighborhood.
Right, and I made the assumption that that had already been discussed.
And those communications that had been happening with us.
They knew
and
nothing
that's for
about
Joel to
that.
speak to.
They knew nothing about that.
You know, and again, what often comes out is we really need, to solve this problem, we have to look at beyond the borders
Yeah.
to resolve other issues in the community, like the school, the traffic connections to 50. And it's a, you can't look at it in an isolated fashion.
Potential for multiple.
Okay, Stan, we're gonna wrap up
I
here
think it's
soon.
very important in partially wrapping up the cumulative effect of what our ideas are individually, and they're different. Believe me, when we have our core meetings, we have different concepts,
Right.
but we work them out. But we don't directly represent anybody except ourselves.
Totally understood.
Therefore,
Get that on camera.
But that does not, that also, that doesn't mean that we don't have cumulative input. I've talked to at least 280 of my neighbors directly, personally, okay? And their input is in here.
Yeah.
And it all went up there a while ago, so that's.
And we appreciate that.
And that's very helpful.
I mean, I'll state clearly, I understand that you're not committing on behalf of yourself or anybody else to anything.
Yeah,
Right.
But,
accept the process.
and that's the part I appreciate, that you're giving, your honest effort so that we can respond to that. And I appreciate that.
I think it's.
And one of the things, and I'll say it while we have this running, because I do think it's a question. We discussed the videotaping of that, and we agreed that it would be appropriate to videotape. I also think it's worth a discussion after we turn it off about what we want done with it or using it, because it's everybody, and it's what they've said, and it's their feelings, and we might want to just make sure that we're all comfortable going forward, and let's talk about that.
Yeah. Were there any other comments here? We do want to wrap up, and because I think we've gone as far as we can with the materials we have and the information we have. And again, this has been very productive from my standpoint. I just want to commend the group for your ability to with good humor and obviously critical thinking, to have this discussion. So Tim and Bill.
I just wanted to ask if, Joel, do you have any summary statement or anything to say after this? I mean, do you have anything to share with us? I mean, given that we're sitting around here and.
Well, I just did.
Well, what's next?
No, and I think we will, as a development team, we'll get together and we'll discuss what we've heard and what we think we should be doing going forward. And we will communicate with your group as we have, and we'll certainly continue in some fashion to work with you as much as you're willing to do that with us. So we'll take it from here.
Well, I think it would be beneficial to have a follow-up meeting with this group.
At this scale.
At this scale, before you take it further and and make a final.
Are we going to see a draft of what you're going to propose before you shoot it out to the community?
That's just what I was saying.
I think we're all on the same page there.
Take it under advisement.
I certainly, well, I'd like to think we can do that. Is there a problem? Scheduling may be difficult and the timing may be difficult. We'll work with Joel and we'll see what we can figure out. Because I understand, and it sounds like it's the appropriate thing to do.
That's cool. If people are willing to do that, again, I think that's a huge contribution.
We got 4,000 hours in this already. Why not?
That's another 10 or 20.
Yeah.
It would be nice to see the results of today.
All right.
Go back and show us.
Let me just ask then, so is it important or necessary that it be a weekend? Is an evening appropriate for the group? Is that something that
Depends on how
might
many
be?
hours it takes.
Well, I know, but
It could be a shorter, like a 2 hour.
So it could be shorter.
A 2 hour evening would be fine.
Yeah.
Okay, good,
I think so.
that's important.
That's
Okay,
it gives us a little more
That-
flexibility.
Exactly.
We thought Saturday for an extended session was appropriate, and Anthony, you all made it, which is
I appreciate that.
fantastic.
What would help probably is getting the documents in advance so we could share them with the people that
Okay.
your specific plan in advance. So, because we want to talk to
You know,
people.
that's one I'm not sure. We're sort of
Yeah.
back to the point of if what we're sharing is the result of this
Right.
meeting, to have it
Yeah.
circulate.
No.
Could bring everybody under sort
Well,
of some.
okay, that may be the case, but we're here for Lost Creek, and we don't speak for everyone, but we've all met and talked. But once again, if you want
Yeah,
buy-in from folks, they're gonna wanna know what happened at this meeting, and
Well, I guess what
I'm talking about the people we live next door to.
There may be feedback that would result in a further refinement of the plan before it goes.
okay.
What I guess I'd say is we
Yes.
probably won't circulate prior to the next meeting. But then,
Right.
at that point, whether what we have is appropriate to release and go out, or whether it's not appropriate and we have to go
Yeah.
back, that will
Because
work out.
I think
That's all
this,
I can say. We'll
again,
work
this
it out.
iterative process is going to get us farther before things, get too widely distributed. But, we will get this out to you electronically, and you can try your hand at another site plan alternative.
I think you did it. No, I think that's what I want. I think I just needed a visual
Cool.
of what it was gonna look
Yeah,
like.
yeah, yeah,
And he
that's-
did that, so,
We're good. Well, we'll
Okay.
capture that too, actually. I mean, even though there's some revisions to it.
So I'd like to put that side by side with what you had up with the
The
topography map.
Yes, yeah, we could do that.
Topography map.
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
oh, absolutely.
Because I think that'll refine it when you see it.
Yeah.
You'll do it.
Exactly,
I
exactly.
know.
We're gonna
Yeah.
start putting
Yeah.
all these layers
Sub
together.
areas.
Well, I have it in my mind that he can do it right.
Yeah. Cut the hand. Beef, did you
Kind
have
of a general
Really?
comment, which may be already obvious to everyone, but one thing that you said, Joyce, is if you don't have the numbers and the density, you can't make these improvements. But if you don't have the numbers and the density, you don't need to. You
Yeah.
don't have to have an extra road.
Right.
You don't have to build walls
It's
around
scale.
it. You don't have to do all that.
Well,
If you have
there's a
fewer
fine line though, because,
numbers.
like I was saying, if you develop those individually and each one does its full amount, there is going to be an impact. And there won't be anybody overseeing that cumulative impact is mitigated
Yes.
by some other means.
Right.
It's all gonna end up
Right,
on French
but
Creek.
if you
And
if you stick to the general plan and the current zoning, that's 101 units, they're not all gonna
Yeah.
go in at once. It's
Yeah.
gonna be a gradual infiltration of 101.
Especially if they're acreage.
Yeah,
EIRs have to
So
account
that-
for cumulative impacts.
less is less.
EIRs have to account for cumulative impacts.
But I think Joyce is if they develop sequentially,
Yeah.
then this EIR already has that development, and this EIR has those two.
Yeah.
So it can happen where it becomes more than 100 units easily, depending on what happens. Now, not- just-
Are you
it's a
already
process.
obligated to, the deals with the paving and roads? Is that no matter what project you come back with, financially, do you already have to do
You know,
those?
it's not our worry for the purpose of the discussion. It isn't.
And I'm anxious
Well, that's
to,
more homes.
I'm anxious to quit when we're ahead.
I think we're all burnt out.
We're good.
There's the voice.
And thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Go
I
Niners.
really question you.
Ken, thank you.
Thank you.